6 common landlord mistakes and how to avoid them. Hi, I'm Derek Karamian with Krystle Properties in Benicia. We cover Vallejo, Benicia, American Canyon, as well as Fairfield. Number 1 has to do with when the property is vacant, and that is setting improper pricing. There's a couple of things that you want to be aware of when you are setting the rental price for your rental property. First and foremost, location. What is the exact location of the property that you are marketing? It's important not to look at general areas, but start looking at comparable rents for very specific, detailed locations. Second, of course, would be size and layout. Is it a great layout? Is it an open layout? Is it functional? These are pretty simple questions, but a lot of people ignore. An unfunctional or dysfunctional, I should say, location will affect the rental pricing that you are going to be able to get. 3-bedroom, 2-bath at 1,100 square feet versus a 3-bedroom, 2-bath at 1,800 square feet. Those are going to demand some different levels of rent. So you want to be aware of those items when you are setting your rental price. Next would be condition. The condition of the property is very important. No one has to provide the Taj Mahal when it comes to rental housing, but if you're pricing your home, similarly to one that has just had $100,000 flip on it and is brand new, absolutely everything, you need to take that into consideration when you're using that as a comp for your rental property. You need to make those adjustments, and you have to be honest with yourself as far as what the real rental condition of your property is. Next, of course, would be amenities. This could be, if it's a single family home, what kind of items are in the location. Again, this can kind of boil down to the first item that we talked about, but when you're starting to get into gated communities, condos, townhouses, things of this sort, what kind of amenities that complex offers are things to consider as part of your pricing. It has, tennis courts, a gym, swimming pool. That's going to demand a little bit more rent than something that doesn't have these items. And the last thing to consider when you are setting your rental price is timing. So in different seasons, you are going to demand a little bit more rent than you would in other seasons. Simple economic supply and demand, the more demand you have, the higher the price you're going to get. Most people do tend to move during the summer months. This has a lot to do with school, things of that sort. And then depending on the area that you're in, not really so much here in Northern California, but in other areas, if it's snowy, if it's cold, if it's raining, these are things that are going to affect the demand at that time. People tend not to like to move when there's inclement weather. So we'll move on to the second mistake. And this one is very, very important, and that is improper tenant screening. We could go on and on about how the level of resident that you place in your rental property is going to affect your experience as a landlord. You could have a dream resident that makes your life easy. You get along with them. They report things that you want them to report. They're not going to call you every time that there's a slightly loose screw on a knob or something like that. Somebody who pays their rent on time. If you don't have good tenant screening, you're going to likely miss out on some of these highest quality renters and end up with more of a nightmare tenant scenario, which is what everyone wants to avoid. So a couple of things that are going to help you as far as your tenant screening is concerned. First and foremost, written criteria. You should have written criteria as a part of how you're going to make your decision. This is important so that you are applying the same standards to all applicants that come in. This could come up in fair housing. You don't want to have any question as to why you chose resident A over resident B. It should be a part of that very cleanly written criteria that you have. Next, you're going to want to have a dependable eviction report. Eviction reporting is a little bit interesting here in California. You do have a delay as far as when that eviction is going to show up on an eviction report. Also, if it's just a filed eviction, as opposed to something that fully went through the court process, it's also not going to show up on that. So certainly if somebody has an eviction that dings on the eviction report, that's a full-on eviction that went through the full process, no stipulated agreement, sheriff lockout, I mean, the whole kit and caboodle. So if you have a good eviction report and something actually dings on there, that's where your red alert should certainly go off. You're not going to have that if you don't have a good, dependable eviction reporting system as a part of your application. Of course, you're going to want a way to verify employment. Next, of course, this is the obvious one, but you want to have a full credit report, something that's going to show you everything that you need to see. Do not recommend letting the resident provide their own credit report. It's easy to falsify that document. You want to be able to get it directly from the credit reporting agencies yourself. And then, of course, last, certainly not least, would be being able to get a good rental history on somebody. You want some positive rental references. There are some hot ways for people to falsify this. So being very certain that you're speaking with the right people and they're not just telling you what you want to hear is very important. So again, proper tenant screening is going to be key to your experience as a landlord. Next common mistake that you're going to want to avoid as a landlord: not being open to pets. Here in California, we have kind of an interesting setup. There is a lot of assistive animals out there, and in California, we must allow for all verified assistive animals. This is kind of a difficult one to know that you're staying on the right side of the law, HIPAA and whatnot. So we actually do ourselves. We outsource to pet screening. Not a sponsor of this video, but we do enjoy them. They are a great partner to us. So you are going to have assistive animals, so you must allow for these. You cannot charge any pet rent. You cannot charge any pet deposit. These are not allowed if it is a verified assistive animal. And then as far as pets, if you do allow pets, yes, you can allow for pet rent. You can allow for pet deposit. And, talking about that whole supply and demand, going back to the, economics 101, the more demand you have for your property, the more rent you're going to be able to see. And being able to cast a wider net and being able to consider people that have pets is going to increase your chances of getting a good qualified renter. So something I do recommend. Unfortunately, I do work with a lot of landlords, and I completely understand it, that don't want to work with pets. Just keep in mind, you are going to ultimately recognize more rent if you do consider pets. So some food for thought. The kind of flooring you have is probably an essential factor and considered if you're going to do that or not. Of course, landscaping, things of that sort. Moving on, fourth common mistake the landlords make is ignoring preventative and routine maintenance. Yeah, so we do some drive-by inspections to try to catch some of these things. We, of course, do our interior inspections. A couple of things, there's a lot of preventative plumbing kind of items you can do. Certainly don't let any water supply rust out. These are the kinds of things that you want to keep an eye open for. You ignore something like that, you can create a lot of water damage. You have water damage, now you might end up with, significant problems. I don't like to use the F word, but maybe mold. You could have some subfloor damage. If it's a multi-unit, certainly you don't want water from one unit going down to another unit. So preventative plumbing, very important. Preventative work on the roof, extending the life of the roof, very important. Keeping up with the gutters, keeping up with the downspouts, pretty important. I'd say it's worth a couple of $100 myself to have somebody go out there, clean out the downspouts, clean out the gutters every once in a while, depending on how many trees and whatnot are around, as opposed to depending on the resident to do that. That's something as a landlord I do recommend that you do. We can kind of go on along the lines of that preventative maintenance and the routine maintenance. Just getting in there and getting inspections, within reason is going to help you catch a lot of these items. I'm going to move on again to the fifth common landlord mistake, and that is very, very important, something that I work with my agents on quite a bit, and that is being familiar with California landlord-tenant laws. Every year, California does tend to have one or two curveballs that they throw into the legislation that have to do with how you handle landlord-tenant relations. A pretty important one that went into place a couple of years ago is the TPA, Tenant Protection Act, 2019. It applies to multiple units or if a property is owned by a corporation. So a lot of our mom and pop investors out there that own a single family home, the TPA is not meant to apply to them. But something that's pretty sneaky, and I say this, I'm not an attorney, if you do not have a specific clause pulled directly from the civil code listed in your lease agreement, then your property does qualify for the Tenant Protection Act. And there's, I'm sure, a whole video that we could do. In fact, I'm sure my attorney probably has a whole video. I'll try to go into the comments later and share that about what the TPA is. So there's just a lot of odds and ends you have to make sure that you hit. You want to make sure that your lease agreement's up to date. I had somebody working with somebody else. I'm not going to say any names, but they had an older agreement. So the lease was entered into in 2019. And it was a good form, but the copyright date on it was 2014. So the laws between 2014 and 2019 very different. So there's some things that were not included in the lease agreement that should have been included in the lease agreement. Even worse than that is getting something that's not state specific. So going online and printing off something that you pay a small amount for or even get for free, just because it works in Delaware, just because it works in Texas, doesn't mean it's going to work here in California. California, we have very specific things that need to be included in the lease, very specific ways that the landlords need to act. So I honestly think this is probably higher up on the list, if not number one. I would say not being familiar with the California landlord-tenant laws could be your biggest mistake as a landlord. It could cost you a lot of money. So make sure you are aware of what you're doing. It's worth every penny to partner with attorneys, professionals, things of that sort to make sure you're on the right side of the law. We get to the final one, number 6, and that has to do with the previous. Neglecting to partner with a local property manager, in this case, Benicia, Vallejo, Fairfield, American Canyon. So very important. You partner with a good property manager. They're your partner in this. They work with you. They make sure you stay on the right side of the law. They make sure that you are aware of what market trends are, help you price out the property, do the resident screening. So all of these items are things that working with a good property manager is going to help you with. Those are your 6 common landlord mistakes. I'm Derek Karamian with Krystle Properties. If you would like to know how you could partner with us to help you out and avoid some of these common pitfalls, please feel free to reach out. Our information is located here below. Thank you so much.